Hey, welcome back to the Personality Hacker Podcast. My name is Joe Mark Witt.
And I'm Antonia Dodge. And on this podcast, we're going to do something a little different. At our last Profiler Training live 5-day event, we gave a talk that we're entitling Your Mess is Your Message. And what we're going to do this week or on this week's podcast is we're going to release it to you. And so you'll hear that the audio quality is a little different than it normally is because it was a live talk that was captured. And you'll hear that it's contextually for that specific audience. We refer to them as Profiler Training students, I believe, a couple times. But we wanted to share it with you because we feel like the message is actually pretty good. We introduced this model that I think we've talked about in previous podcasts that we don't really have a name for it, but we loosely call it the Calibrator, Integrator, and Visionary model. And we talk a little bit about something that each individual person might be looking for, or maybe a missing component whenever they're trying to bring something big to the world. And then also we introduce this idea that if you're struggling to figure out what your message is, well, it might actually live inside the things that you have already experienced in your life. So we wanted to share this talk with you because we believe that it had some pretty good stuff in it, and we thought we'd release it as a podcast.
So without further setup, we're going to take you to the main stage at our Profiler Training event.
So my 3 children play this game at home. It's called Rocket League. How many people have ever played this game, Rocket League, on PS3, PS4, PlayStation, something like that? Okay. Christian in the back. So Rocket League is a cool game. They love this game because you can connect multiple controllers and play with multiple players. And what it is it's an arena soccer game, basically. This big arena you're in a video game format. And you're basically trying to score a goal with this giant soccer ball. But instead of people you're controlling vehicles. So cars that you can kind of custom design, or trucks, or other mobile vehicles. You can do 1 versus 1, or 2 versus 2, 3 versus 3. You can play online with people all over the world. You can play locally with your friends or family, right there in your living room. And it's a really fun game, and you play for 5 minutes. You score whoever scores the most points on a score, just like regular soccer, except you're using a car to bounce the ball into the goal. It's basically a soccer game, except for that. But there's this interesting phenomenon that happens when my children play. When I play, I like to use the car cam view because it's very easy for me to intuitively know how to drive a vehicle because I've been doing it for decades. I turn left, I go left. I turn right, I go right. I go forward, backward, and the car and the screen turn together like this, right? You've all played video games where it's first person, the car's here, the person's here, and you're driving through it. I think all 3 of my kids, maybe Piper, our youngest, doesn't play on this other setting, but you can toggle to what's called a ball cam. And what this does as you're playing is the camera frame follows the ball, not the car. Now the car is still in the frame. So if the car is far away from the ball, the frame will zoom way out to keep the car in the frame. But the focal point in the frame at all times is the ball, up and down and over, and no matter where, the ball is in view. Well, to orientate the ball to be in view at all times, that means the view of the car has to skew as it's being viewed. And so the control of that vehicle becomes much more difficult for me. My kids love it. They can do it really well because it takes some skill to build, because when I push left, I'm seeing the car here and I see the ball. I'm I got to go left to get it, but the car's angled a different direction. I've got to kind of think in terms of, okay, where is the car angled to get to where I got to go to hit the ball to score the point? So I don't even like that view. But it really is a superior view. When I watch them play both, I notice that they score more points, and it works better when they have ball view because the ball is always in view. They never lose sight of the ball. When I play, I have it on car cam. I lose sight of the ball constantly. And they beat me every time. I'm trying to turn around, and where did it go? I'm looking for it, but it's just too difficult to play with ball cam. I just can't keep track of my car. So for me, I choose to go ahead and have the ball go out of my frame to where I can't see it anymore. And I try to adjust the car because it's more intuitive for me, even though it's probably a better way to play to keep that ball in the view.
Everybody who is at the top of the leaderboard in Rocket League uses ball cam. There's nobody who's at the top of because you play with people all over the world, and whoever's at the top is all using ball cam. Well, nobody's using car cam.
We're pretty sure that's the case.
Yeah.
I don't know that if you could probably find some INTP in the crowd right stat. No, it's actually this percentage breakdown or whatever. But we think that's probably what's going on anecdotally from what we've observed. Yeah. I can't verify that, but that's basically what we think. Yeah.
Right.
See.
Depending upon the situation. But you have to master ball cam. But the thing about car cam is it always keeps your focal point on you. So you lose sight of the goal, but you're totally self-oriented. Versus the people who are winning, they're keeping their eye on the ball, on the ultimate end goal, but they're not focused on the self.
Yeah. So, pin that for a moment. We want to talk about a model that I think we've mentioned on a podcast briefly, but we like to expand upon it tonight a little bit more. And we think it's applicable to your profiler training experience and your life in general as we go through a personal growth experience and things like this. We want to talk about this model tonight. There's really I don't know if there's a name for this model.
No, because
we kind of hodgepodge some things together and came up with this, right?
As usual, the roots are something that we saw somewhere else, but then we've added to it and sort of fleshed it out. So there's no name for this. It's just kind of a concept, a model that we're playing with. So
I got this book about a year ago or so. Nee on our team recommended it. It's called Traction. And it talks about every business needing two things. And you might have read this book and you might have heard us talk about it on the podcast at some point. But basically every business needs two things. Somebody to see the vision of what needs to happen in that business or where it's going, and then somebody to actually integrate or make that vision happen. And those two in tandem can work really well. A great example of this is the Walt Disney Company when it started. You know, all of us know who Walt Disney is. It's actually named after him, but it was actually early on called, I think, Disney Brothers Cartoons or the Disney Brothers Studio, because Walt Disney's older brother, who I suspect was probably an INTJ, I don't know for sure, but he seems like that. And Disney was probably more of that EP essence, you know, that very visionary casting and creative and like just do a lot of stuff. His brother is really the secret weapon of why the Walt Disney Company just bought Fox recently for like $75 billion, whatever this price tag was. Ridiculous sums of money, because they worked in tandem. We had a visionary looking to see what could be created, you know, with animation or theme parks or whatever's coming next technologically. He even had visions for cities. He wanted to see new cities created with his environmental prototype community of tomorrow, Epcot concept. And he was going to actually build that in Orlando. He died before he could realize it. But he had all these grand visions, and his brother was always trying to just keep up and make it happen through an integration framework. So you can kind of see that in a real life dynamic if you read the history, a great book called Building a Company, the story of Roy O. Disney and building Walt Disney Company from his side of the framework, which is a great book because it really shows you how all the things had to underpin this amazing enterprise that was created in the last century. But as we were going through this and looking at our business, we were talking a lot about, okay, where do our team members fall? Where do we fall? What are our strengths? Who is the visionary here? Who is the integrator here between the two of us and with our team and the people we work with and some of the businesses we consult with? And we were through that conversation, we're realizing something's missing. It just feels like there's another element that creates excellence in businesses, in families, in organizations, and all the different things that basically are created in the world. And we came up with this concept, something that we feel we actually do really well here at Personality Hacker, which is add in the component of what's called a calibrator. So a third element that's not in this book that we added kind of to the model, and now we're hodgepodging this together. We're talking a lot about it because with these three things in place, we feel like it can build really cool organizations, family dynamics, businesses, whatever you want to do. You have a visionary, someone or some ones who can see the vision. Then you have integrators who can actually implement and make that vision go. But who is going to get on the back of a plane, that drift that happens, or a boat when you start to get off kilter a little bit? The engines are driving you forward. That's the integration. And the pilot can see where they're going, but how do they calibrate the plane so it just stays finely tuned? And that's that calibrator role. It's a finely tuned role that constantly is calibrating something as it's moving forward and always pivoting and keeping it on track, on course, basically.
Most people are familiar with the concept of a visionary, but the way that we're defining it is somebody who sees something that is not yet, right? Somebody who can imagine a future, a place coming up that might be very difficult to articulate to others. It's a vision, right? A lot of people have gone to maybe personal development seminars or read books that talk about what is your vision for your life. And that is, how do you want it to unfold? Where are you navigating toward, right? What is your vision? And when we talk about integrator, we're talking about somebody who can help make it happen, build the structures that are required to get to that end game. And as Joel just mentioned, the calibrator piece is the person who makes sure that there's not too much drift, that as you're moving toward your end game, that you're not going too far this direction. Because an integrator, just in trying to make things happen, can sometimes drift just because maybe those are the resources that they have available. And so they kind of go off this direction because that's the place of the most resource. Or a visionary can cast a vision, but then be really uncertain about how to get to that end game. So when we were talking about this, because we were trying to figure out what PH was, like, is PH a visionary place or is it an integrator place? And we realized we're actually a calibrator company. Probably a little bit fashioned after me and my content because I'm a calibrator, but a lot of it has to do with calibration. And that's why you guys are here. You guys are here for calibration. You're here to sort of get that sort of the nuances. But the challenge with the calibration is that you don't know where you're headed. You don't know why you're doing what you're doing. And a lot of people lack vision. They lack vision for their life. They lack vision for why they're doing what they're doing. Sometimes it's just autopilot. Sometimes this is just the next interesting thing. A lot of people come to Personality Hacker because they really like this tool and they want to get really, really super, super good at it. But it's like, what are you going to do with this? The more we think about this model and the more we've thought about other people and sort of where they fit, we realized kind of like maybe Enneagram instincts, you might have a dominant or something that is first in your life, something that is an auxiliary that supports it, and maybe even a blind spot underneath. So we spend some time asking, like, what is the person's first, what's their second, and what's their blind spot? If something is your first, visionary, integrator, or calibrator, if it's your first position, you probably can read and write it. By read and write, we mean if somebody casts a vision, you catch it quickly. You can read it. When somebody goes, I think this would be a really cool thing, you immediately catch it and you can go, yeah, that's a great vision for your future. So the same thing with calibration, you can read and write it. When you hear other people's calibration, you can kind of get a sense for it. And the same thing with integration ideas. If it's your secondary, you probably can read it, but you have trouble writing it, meaning that you can hear it when other people are talking about it, but you might not be that great at doing it yourself or unsure of how to manifest it. If it's your blind spot, you might not be able to pick it up at all. So Joel is most likely a visionary integrator, and he's calibrator last. I'm a calibrator visionary, but I'm an integrator last. I can't get anything done. I never know how to make anything happen. I'm always like, I don't know how to put on an event. It just sort of happens around me. I don't know, like, there's a camera, cool. Like, look at the lights. How did that happen? I'm always just sort of tripping through life, right? But I'm pretty good with calibration, which is why I teach models and enjoy things that have nuance. The reason why we're talking about this is I think there's a lot of value in self-diagnosing where you fall here. Because if you have one of these in your blind spot, it might be the thing that's tripping you up. It might be the thing that's if you're like me, a calibrator visionary, you can catch a vision, but you might not be great at setting one. You might be really good at knowing whether or not you're headed in the right direction. But if you can't get anything done, you need an integrator in your life. You need somebody that can help you make it happen. With Joel is an excellent visionary. He's always got a place where he's casting where we want to go next, what's the next piece. Live events are part of his vision. These live events exist because Joel saw it, right? And so we're doing it now, and it's amazing. And he's great at He's pretty good at making things happen. He's got enough integrator chops to help make it happen, but his calibration is sometimes off. So it'll be like, I think we're gonna do this thing. And I'm like, I don't know if it's exactly that thing. And then we'll have conversations and sort of refine it. And that's where I step in. But we at PH talk a lot about contribution. And if you're going to use what you learned here at Personality or in Profiler training for contribution, you're gonna need to have all three of these ducks in a row, right? And you might not want to use it for contribution. And if you don't, that's totally fine.
And whether it's you or a team you build or other people that support you in your life, it doesn't necessarily all have to be you to have these ducks in a row. Don't panic. It's not like, oh, you gotta have all these in a row.
Well, what I mean is that any entity that is making something happen oftentimes needs to have these ducks in a row. So we want to talk a little bit about vision. Because most of the time, vision is what people lack. All right, there's a lot of us in here, especially in this group. We are super into models, and that makes most of us calibrators, actually. Most of us are super into the stuff we're into because we love systems, we love calibration, we love to hear from calibrators. We're always trying to get really good at what we do. That's why you're spending the resource you're spending, time, money, effort, to be here is because you love calibration. Most of you are probably calibrators. And there's a lot of integrators here, most likely too, because you made this happen. right? And the challenge with lacking vision is that you might get super, 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 super good at this. But then to what end, right? For what? For what purpose? Now, you might be a really great visionary, and you might be a good integrator, and you're here for calibration, and kudos to you, because you might be in the best position of anybody in here. If you are either integrator visionary or visionary integrator, coming to things like this will help you get calibration. So you're probably in the best position of anybody. But if anybody here is somebody who's lacking vision, what we wanted to do is we wanted to talk a little bit about vision, what it can look like, and some of the things that trip us up when we're trying to create a vision for our lives and also for what to do with this content.
One of the biggest challenges with vision is, look at the example I threw out. Walt Disney. It's like, who's gonna in this room compete with freaking Walt Disney? I mean, come on. And we talk about like people like Elon Musk, or these like big visionaries that have like these grandiose, they world change stuff. And we forget that there's this idea of smaller visions. They can be smaller visions for your life, for your next day, for your week, for your year, whatever. It doesn't have to be this epic thing like, I've decided that I'm gonna go and do this thing in this country and help these people and build this thing. Like it doesn't have to be that epic all the time. But I think there's a lot of pressure on us as, at least in our culture and society, to, if we're gonna be casting a vision or trying to find the vision for what's coming next, it has to be, I hate to get specific, but end carbon emissions in 12 years or nothing. Like, it's like this crazy thing, and it's so far-reaching. There's no calibration underneath it that people dismiss it, and it's unfortunate. It's unfortunate because it doesn't have to be that way. I think if the visions can be more manageable, more bite-sized, more pragmatic, I believe that we could actually achieve them. So we have to see this, and then you look around in our culture, everywhere. I don't care what side of the spectrum you are on as far as political or social or anything, everybody's wanting to fix something. This is wrong, it's gotta be fixed. And when I talk to people like that, I'm just like, well, what do you wanna see different? And often it's just, I want it fixed. I want this to be gone, I want it to be fixed. And it's very difficult for people to tell you what they envision to be in its place. And to me, that is also something that lacks in our world. We don't have a lot of people casting forth what they'd love to see as the positive thing to move forward. It's all the thing we wanna move away from. And what are we moving toward? It's hard to get anybody on board to something unless they know what we're moving toward, right? We all know this, setting a tone. You came here, you probably had a picture in your mind what this event would look like. You had a picture in your mind. We probably gave you a little snapshot of a vision of what this would mean for your life, what it would look like getting here, how you would get here. You started to picture imagining the experience, whether it was auditory, visual, or kinesthetic, but you had this experience of imagining, what's it like to come to a profiler training event? You're starting to get a picture in your head, and then you come here, and now you flesh that out. And now you're probably catching a vision maybe for some of the things you could do with this. As you're calibrating this, you're like, wow, maybe I could use it in this application or this application. Maybe ideas are starting to come up for you. And I think that's really what we want to talk about a little bit here, is just how can you take some of these ideas and start to fashion what you want to see into the future. So I think that's one of the things, is it's this epic. It's always the ultimate. Would you agree with that as far as that goes? I want this talk to be more back and forth, not just so monologue-y. Yeah. So let's just jump in and just kind of go, like, we'll banter, more like a podcast than a formal talk.
Sounds fantastic. All right.
So let's do that.
So see, Joel's casting a vision for how he wants this talk to be.
I didn't even realize that. I just didn't I? Well, I have an imagination of what I want to see it looking like.
Well, and that's actually an example of how you can start to build your chops as a visionary, is that they don't have to be huge in magnitude. A vision can be something that's small. We never script our podcast, ever. We might have one or two bullet points, but we always do what we call, we have a magnet in the middle of the field.
This is what it would look like, sort of, what our script would look like.
This is our script. These are our podcast
usually
scripts.
sits over there. We just write a couple notes.
Yeah, unless we're doing one on a book and then we like stick to the source material a little bit. But if it's something that's coming from us, we usually just have a couple different little notes, and we figure out what our end point is. What is the point of why we're talking about what we're talking about? And that's what we call our magnet in the middle of the field. And we're constantly calibrating to that. And that's a vision for that podcast episode. Visions can be very small. The other thing is that we feel like if we have a vision for our life, it's got to be the end-all be-all of what we are trying to accomplish in life. But I think that we can be serially monogamous with our visions. Serially monogamous meaning that a vision can lead to another vision, which leads to another vision. So you don't have to know this end game thing. It can be something that's just occupying the next couple of years for you, and that can be a vision. So another thing when we create vision is the challenge that we are not all visual. So vision, by definition, indicates sight. But I'm not a visual person. When it comes to my modality of learning, I'm auditory. So whenever anybody was like, cast a vision for your life, see the colors, like see what's going on, make it really clear, I would just struggle and be like, it's like black and white and kind of hazy, and I think I'm doing this thing, because my modality is not visual at all. So how do you cast a vision when you're not visual? Joel is kinesthetic. He is entirely about embodying something. How do you cast a vision when it's all in movement, right?
We actually had to drive here to this room, and I just stand on this area here and kind of like imagine what it would look like and walk around the room and kind of plot out how this would go. I couldn't picture it. I had to be here on site, and once I was here, then I caught, okay, that's how we're gonna do it. We're gonna set the room, blah, blah, blah. And they had the table set up with like this middle row, and I was like, that's not gonna work. We gotta move these, we gotta combine these and move them over. I couldn't see it until we got here though, because I'm kinesthetic. I had to be in the moment, in the space.
So if you are trying to figure out what your vision for using this content is, if you're gonna come here to calibrate and then take it out to the world for any form of contribution to community, you're gonna have to cast a vision for what you want to use this content for. You're gonna have to cast a vision for what you wanna use this skill for. And one of the things you can do is figure out what is your primary way of casting a vision? Is it visual? Do you see yourself doing something? Or do you experience yourself doing something? Or can you sort of talk yourself through doing something? Figure out what is your best way of casting a vision. The next one is take it into smaller chunks. What is the kind of thing that you would like who is the kind of person that you want to be using this content for? You don't have to become an influencer if you don't want to. That's not what we're trying to say. But you can be quite influential. And one of my favorite sayings came from a friend that said, your mess is your message. Your mess is your message, meaning that whatever shit you've gone through in your life that you had to get through, that you had to just muscle your way through and figure it all out, and took all these calories burning just to figure out this problem or challenge, at the end of it, you have a ton of wisdom to provide for other people who might be going through the exact same mess as you. So what is your mess? What is the thing that you have had to brute force your way through life? And in retrospect, you realize you have all this insight around it. And can you use this tool and other tools that you're collecting to apply to a message? Something that has some vision for other people, something that encourages other people to have a better life, just like you've figured out how to have a better life having gone through that mess.
And so vision can be emergent. I actually used this metaphor the other day. Has anybody heard of the term about overdriving your headlights? When I took driver's ed, I'd already had my driver's license. I did it to get the insurance lowered. It's like 6 months after. It was a weird experience. But I remember in driver's ed, you have to watch all these training films and do all this stuff, and they talk about overdriving your headlights. It's basically the concept of you're driving, you basically, when at nighttime when your headlights are on, you want to drive as fast as when something enters the first part of the headlight, you're able to stop before you hit that. And if you're driving faster, then your ability to stop as soon as something enters into the light, you're overdriving your headlights. In other words, you're going to run into it because you can't stop by the time you'll see it, you won't be able to stop in time. And it depends on how fast you're going, so that's why it's more calibrated to what you can see right in front of you. And I'm guessing in a calibrator's way, because people probably approach this differently, if you're a calibrator, you kind of almost, you can see far to the edge of the headlight and you almost roll your ball out that far and you kind of work your way out, and then now you can see a little further. Like the headlights now extend because you've moved forward toward that little smaller vision. So don't worry, this is one thing I've really struggled with. Feeling like a visionary, but I can't see things clearly. I have to kind of let it be emergent. I can only go as far as my headlights can see. I know which direction I'm going. You know, I want to drive to California. I know I'm going there, but I can't really see it yet because it's nighttime. I only see as far as my headlights. So I roll the ball forward, and I get there, and now the headlights extend further. I keep doing that over and over again. I'm guessing calibrators work very similar. I don't know how calibrators do this. I'd love to hear from you how your experience of it is.
Well, and I think I'm visionary second, so I can see just a little bit down the road. But I think actually what you might be more talking about is, my suspicion is that if you're using extroverted intuition in any of your positions, right, even if it's your inferior function, you probably have emergent vision because you're not wired to see way down the road. If you're using introverted intuition, because intuition is basically a form of imagination. If you're using introverted intuition in any of your positions, including your inferior, you probably, when you get into your intuitive creative place, are looking further down the road because you're programmed to try to see a future way down the line. So if you're using introverted intuition, you're probably more likely to be a long-range visionary. If you're using extroverted intuition, you're probably more likely to have an emergent vision come over time. And that's perfectly acceptable. You don't have to have that beautifully painted picture of what you're doing in your ideal world in order to have a vision for what you want. So in some of us, allow your vision to emerge over time. Now, that's not a rule. If you're using introverted intuition and you have an emergent vision style, that's perfectly acceptable. And same thing with extroverted intuition. If you can see way down the road, that's fine too. But really what we're trying to encourage people to do is to use what you learn here and other places to cast a vision, to actually know what it is that you want to accomplish with these tools. Yeah. It's so easy to keep your vision on car cam because it's much simpler to navigate your way through life if you're focused 100% on yourself, right? Like, it's easier to know when to take a left or a right. It's easier to know how to just sort of use this instrument. It's much more difficult to keep your eye on the ball. When you're using ball cam, it's much more difficult because you constantly have to orientate yourself towards your end game. And yet, all the greatest players are on ball cam, right? They're all keeping their eye on the ball. And so what's difficult about being a visionary or having a vision or even having somebody else cast a vision that you think is important and you want to follow is that you've got to keep your eye on the ball the whole time. You can't be self-focused. You got to get through your ego. One of the biggest challenges to all visions is yourself, is your own ego.
Well, it's because vision's scary. I mean, it's so easy to be a calibrator. It's not easy to be a calibrator, excuse me. It's easy to spout calibration. This is wrong. It's over here. It needs to be over here. Fix this, blah, blah, blah. You know, that's so easy to say that. I mean, the work doing it is hard, but to say that, to be a critic, everybody's, you know, the term everybody's a critic. Most critics, I think, are calibrators. You know, the film critics or whoever's judging things, they're calibrators. They're saying, well, that guy didn't have good lighting in his movie. That woman was a terrible actress. You know, they have all these comments about whatever, right? These calibration comments. It's not really that scary. The other people had to take the risk and put the movie out or create the TV show or whatever. I get to sit back here on my comfy couch and write to the Washington Post how I didn't like this or whatever, blah, 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 blah. Yeah, calibration's kind of straightforward, and no one will really come at you for it. Integration's extremely useful. Who's going to get on your case for making crap happen in a company, a nonprofit, or your family? Like, oh, you made Thanksgiving dinner. Oh, screw you, I hate you. Why did you do this? Like, I mean,
everybody loves an integrator.
Yeah, or like, you know, oh, wow, thanks for making this thing happen. Like, everybody's gonna love it. But then you start casting a vision, and you just saw this happen in this conversation earlier. I'm like, oh yeah, carbon emissions in 12 years. It's so easy to dismiss it. It's so easy to make fun of it. It's so easy to marginalize it, and it's so much of a risk to take. You put your neck out there because you're basically seeing something other people haven't seen yet. You're trying to cast something into the future to say, hey, we want to do this thing. Look what's possible. And it probably is possible. It just might not be possible in the timeline that's been cast, but it's probably possible eventually. And maybe it's possible in smaller chunks and we can get there in stages. And that's the thing, is vision has to have calibration integration with it. If it's just running wild, it's these huge visions. But that's why I think it's so scary and our egos get involved. If we start to stick our neck out there, and people think we're silly or stupid or we're seeing something nobody else sees, like what, and a lot of us are intuitive here or very intuitive friendly in this room if you're not an intuitive. So you probably have a lot of this, you know, this idea generation type things, like what's possible. And it's risky and the world doesn't necessarily understand that kind of thinking. So I think that's also part of the reason is that it's easier to put focus on yourself, but it's also terrifying to put your kind of casting out what you could see for the future out there.
What's really great though is profiling is one of the best ways to get over your ego. And I don't know why that is. I have some theories on why that is, but I'm talking about ego in the sense of the part of us that wants to live. The part of me that's Antonia, that's my ego, right? When I'm Antonia Ying, which is I'm going through the world as Antonia, that's my ego that's being represented. And I believe that my ego is like the most important thing that I could possibly be protecting. When I die, it'll be the greatest tragedy the universe has ever known. I'm sure of it because I try to prevent my death like crazy, right? Like I'm pretty sure that I need to be living and everybody knows I need to be alive, right? That's your ego. The ego is the part of you that wants to live. And so the ego gets very self-protective. It gets very much in survival mode most of the time. And that's one of the reasons why things like getting out of your comfort zone is so scary. I mean, what part of you thinks that you're actually going to die if everybody's paying attention to what you're saying, right? Like if everybody's focused on you and what you're saying and you're panicking or having a moment, like what about us makes us think that that's going to kill us, right? All of that ego stuff, all that part about like, well, maybe they won't like me, and maybe I'll get booted from the tribe, and if I get booted from the tribe, I'm certainly not going to survive the winter, right? All that ancient programming that makes us feel like we are super, super, super important. And so one of the things I've noticed about profiling is that when you start to really understand how your mind is constructed, and you just sort of naturally go, oh, this is the leverage point. I got to develop my auxiliary function. I kind of got to watch for that looping thing, and maybe I'm in the grip. And then you start profiling other people, and they start asking you questions about what they should be doing, and you start giving them coaching advice, and you realize that you're being a hypocrite because you're telling them to get their co-pilot, and you're not getting your co-pilot, and you're like, you totally shouldn't be looping. And I'm like, man, I'm totally looping, right? It's very reflective. All this mirrors back to us just how much attachment to our ego we have. And the thing about being a visionary or having a vision, even if you're not a visionary, is that you got to keep it on ball cam. You can't keep it on car cam. It forces you to get out of your shit. It forces you to get out of your ego. And profiling is a way to help you encourage you to get out of your ego. And you can't stay in your ego, by the way. You will be a terrible profiler if you're too much in your ego. It actually makes you a bad profiler. It's one of the best ways to calibrate is to figure out ways that you're still in your ego, because it does things like it encourages you to overvalue your own experience. So everybody who seems like you must be you, right? That's you, that's car cam, right? That's not ball cam. It does things like when you see something you don't like, well, then that must be that personality type that you don't get along with. Oh, everybody I don't like is an ISTJ, right? Of course, that's my thing, but it forces you to get over that. You've got to get over your ego.
Sorry, STJ's watching.
Yeah. Well, like I said, this is my thing. It's more that they don't like me than the other way. But that said, there's so much shit that profiling actually, at its base tool, requires us to get really radically honest with what's going on underneath everything. It's kind of all gears underneath there. And the better we get at getting over our egos, the better we are as a profiler. So as calibrators, it encourages us to get to that point. But behind that is, what are we going to do with this? How are we going to use this skill that we've developed to contribute? What vision are we going to cast for not just being an excellent profiler, but actually taking it out to the world and helping other people? And like I recommended, focus on that concept of your mess is your message. What is your mess? Who are the people that you can truly help because you've navigated this space? You already have figured it out. What's the demographic of people who you can really help with all of this by getting them through what you already maybe took you 10 years to go through, but with your advice, with your coaching, with your vision, they can get through it in maybe 2 years, right? And you just save them 8 years of life. So to set a vision for what your message is, we've often asked people 3 questions. And so we want to leave everybody with these 3 questions as you're trying to kind of cast your personal vision and figure out how you're going to use this for contribution. The first question is, what subject do you love so much? When people are talking about it, like let's say you're in a restaurant and you're hearing people in the next table over talk about this subject, you cannot help but interrupt them and be a part of that conversation because you love talking about it so much. What is that subject? What do you love? That subject you just love so much. Maybe you know more about it than anybody, or it just juices you up. What is that subject? All right, everybody got that first question? Okay. The second question is, what problem have you solved that when other people, let's say you're in a restaurant again, and other people are talking about it, and somebody is giving somebody bad advice, telling them to do the wrong thing that you know won't work, you have to interrupt them and correct them because you know how to solve that problem.
You're trying to alleviate their suffering from instituting this terrible advice, and you're compelled to do so. You just have to correct it.
You just have to correct it.
Because you know this person's going to go down 6 months of suffering if they follow the advice of this person telling them to do this thing or whatever.
And I use the restaurant just to indicate the level of like motivation you have for it. But what problem have you solved that when people give bad advice around it, you have to interrupt them to correct them because you know how to solve this problem? And here's the third question, and here's the vision casting question, the big one. You have 10 minutes in front of a microphone, and every person on the planet has to listen to you for 10 minutes. I mean, people on the other side of the world that are asleep have to wake up for this.
Like, it's translated into every language on the planet.
Translated in every, like women
in real time.
Women with babies on their backs working in rice paddies have to stop and listen to you for 10 minutes, right? Every person on the planet has to stop and listen to you for 10 minutes.
All the politicians of the world in the middle of their meetings have to stop and listen to you. Every religious leader, every worker, every man, woman, and child, every person in every part of the corner of the planet has to stop and listen to you for 10 minutes.
What is the most important thing you could say in that 10 minutes? What would you use that 10 minutes for? What would be your message? And the center of that Venn diagram of those three things, that's what you're here for. That's your vision.
Or at least that's the road to the vision.
That's
it might still
the
be
magnet.
like, how do I, yeah, that's the nugget of it that you can start to build off of.
That's
basically.
the magnet in the middle of the field. And then you need to figure out how to get there through integration, and you need to calibrate your way there. No drift. Got to get right there.
And you might have to calibrate your way to those three questions. It may not be tonight you have the answers, and tomorrow morning you wake up, it's like, I know what I'm supposed to do with my life. I think it's probably a lifelong journey to do this, and a check-in all the time and continue to ask these questions, because our messages change. You know, what you might say today for 10 minutes on a microphone is very different than we would say 20 years ago or 5 years ago. And thinking into the future, would this be the message I'd have 20 years from now? Is this that important to me that I think it will also be important to me at that moment? So this is something that I think could shift and change depending on your life circumstance. But I bet you there's core themes that start evolving or emerging from your life as you start to do some of these questions, these exercises. These questions are to prime the pump, right? To get you thinking in terms of, how do I think about this? What is it that I love to do? What is it that I want to contribute? What is the problem I've solved that I'm just compelled to help people with?
I recommend doing it about every 3 years. And when I say that's what you're here to do, I don't mean that's what you're here to do for the rest of your life. I mean right this second. Right now, that's what you're here to do. And it will change over time. And as Joel mentioned, there will be core themes. There's going to be a vein that runs through all of this, most likely, but it could change too, right? And I recommend doing this exercise about once every 3 years.
I was at a conference once. It was like this, back in my Christian days, it was like a youth conference or something I was at. And I was talking to the person, like a bunch of people, there was a booth there, and this woman was saying, yeah, we are a book publisher, we publish books. I was like, oh really? We got talking, and I'm a very connective person, as you could tell, I got a lot of energy, and I like, she was like, wow, she was just taken by me, like just my energy and my exuberance and my intuition and just the conversation in general. And she said, I basically get book authors to publish. Do you have a book in your head that you'd love to publish with us? And I was like, I don't know. I never thought of it before. Like I never had that thought, and then all of a sudden that opportunity was there, and I didn't know what to tell her. And I kind of see this for a lot of us in this room as we learn profiling, as we learn personal growth principles, as we learn about typology, as we move through the world. There's going to be 10 minutes at the microphone opportunity for you at some point. It may not be the entire planet. It may not be everybody like that scenario we painted, but there's going to be this moment for all of us at some moment, and maybe multiple times in our life, where we get to give a message to somebody and be prepared for when the opportunity gives itself to be helpful, to contribute, to be highly calibrated, to either cast a vision for them or help them calibrate something or help them figure out how to get something done. Give them one of those things, whatever we're wired to do, right? Our individual wiring. And through all the things we're learning here with profiling and all the personal growth principles, you're going to have those opportunities. You probably have had some of them, maybe not even known to you, to be able to contribute. So when these contributive opportunities come up, are you going to be ready? Are you going to be ready to be able to contribute? Will you have the resource? Will you have the understanding? Will you have the calibration? Will you have the intention? Will you have the energy for it? You know, a lot of times people have tons of knowledge. They can't sustain enough energy to be able to contribute. So are you going to be ready when those opportunities present themselves? Because we don't know when they're going to come sometimes. And then they come and they present themselves to you, kind of like that woman who, if I'd had an idea for a book and pitched it to her, I probably would have been a published author like 15 years ago, right? But I didn't, it just caught me so unaware. I was unprepared for a present opportunity. And I went away just like the next day I had all these ideas. I was like, well, I should have told her this. And I had this idea, I had these notes here, and I was kicking myself, and the conference was over. I didn't have her contact information. I was like, what an idiot I was. I didn't take advantage of that opportunity. So I think that's so unfortunate. If you have that opportunity to contribute, we want to see that for you. We want you to be ready for it when it comes.
So Helen Keller said, the only thing worse than being blind is having sight but lacking vision. We highly recommend that you take some time over the course of the next few days as you're in a calibration mode. This is a calibration context. We're doing tons of calibration. Keep your tendrils sort of touching this idea of vision. How are you going to use this? What are you going to go back and apply this toward? What is your mess and what is your message?
Thanks everybody for being here. Awesome first day. Oh my God, awesome first day. I feel amazing. Give yourselves a hand. Got the profile. Great job.
So what do you think? You've been listening along to Antonia and I giving a talk on the main stage at Profiler Training, the last Profiler Training event. We want to hear from you. What questions, comments, or stories do you have to share about some of the things we talked about in today's episode? You can come over and leave your comment, ask your question, share your story directly below this podcast at personalityhacker.com. You can also join a community of like minds, a growing community of like minds over on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. Like, we're all over the social medias these days. So come and connect with us on the social media platform of your choice. We'd love to have you be a part of that community.
I love that you called it the social medias.
The social medias.
That was adorable.
It's like a double plural. Is that right? Because media is already a plural, right?
I love how crusty old person we are. It's
come on.
actually
Silicon
a badge
Valley
of
makes
honor.
up words all the time.
It's true. It's totally true. If you enjoyed this podcast, you can subscribe to us on iTunes and various Android platforms. If you leave us a rating and review on iTunes, that helps us out a lot. And of course, we have a book, and you should go buy it. It's called Personality Hacker, and it's filled with all sorts of great stuff, and people are giving it great reviews, so go pick yourself up a copy.
My name is Joel Mark Witt.
And I'm Antonia Dodge.
And we'll talk with you on the next Personality Hacker podcast.